room, right? Like it is, what goes into thinking about that and like how to do it differently, but the same, like, like, are there, what's the challenges there about balancing
Oh
what's
yeah,
been done and
you could redo it completely and maybe make people mad, or you could try to look at something. Well, this is what a transporter room has looked like. This is what it looked like in the 60s. This is what it looked like in, actually they shared transporter rooms between the original series
it flips
films.
it upside down or something?
Yeah, there's like they were using the same set to save money. But then Next Gen has, a similar, almost the same footprint as the Voyager transporter room. So these are all, a 10, 20, or, maybe a 15-year gap. So now it's 25 years later. The elevators existed 25 years ago, but maybe they're slightly flashier now, but they still look like an elevator. There's not like globes floating us around. Like we know what an elevator looks like. So it was just trying to update it, 20 or 30 years, but still make it fit in that world. And actually I had this funny, I have a funny little anecdote. When they lit the transporter room. So I said, hey, can I check these lights out? I had sent like a video showing like, how the little lily pads light up and what each thing does. And the guy showed it to me and, they just had it rigged to turn on. So it was like a light switch and every light turned on at once. And I was like, oh my gosh, like this is really bad. Like someone's transporting in and then the whole thing, like it's, yeah, like the transporter rooms work a certain way. And so I had gotten into like a whiny argument with this guy, but I was like, that's not how transporters work. And he's like, because they're real, and like he gave me a little lip, but I was like, yeah, dude, they've been around since the 60s, that there's the way, the fate.
There's people like me who've grown up their whole lives knowing exactly how it should look and feel and sound. And if you deviate from that, you're going to get a bunch of hate mail.
Oh, heaven forbid if you deviate from it. Good grief.
But you know what I mean? Like if one person transports in, he's on his lily pad lights up. Why would the one next to him be lit up? Right. So why would all of them be
common
lit?
sense? I agree.
That's what it is. So I had gotten into this funny argument about fictional science, but luckily there was time and they rewired the whole thing to make it work. So
then Michael Okuda comes in with a spear and starts beating the guy.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And Mike too was watching on the monitor from home. So like on the Enterprise D, at least he'd call me and he'd be like, hey, Liz, yada, yada, yada. And I'd bring his note down to Terry, on the set just to make sure that they knew that, everyone's in alignment with how this works.
So to extrapolate this, and I'm sorry if it's going to get too technical, but if you have a color palette and a look that's established, do you have to stay on top of lighting technology, camera sensor technology, LUTs, post-production? Because all of those elements, like how, lenses, different lens sets interpret color differently. Do you have to stay on top of that stuff to make sure that the palette carries all the way through? And is it frustrating in post when a color corrector like adds a shade of blue to everything in post and it kind of throws everything off?
Yeah, we try to accommodate where we can. And it depends on if you're shooting like black and white. Like a good example was the Lighthouse, the Eggers film, the color, all the stuff that they played with, because they were shooting a certain like blue filter or red filter, the costumes had to be certain colors in order to show up on camera. So that is absolutely something that needs to be paid. The color you paint the walls of the set too. Like I had on How to Get Away with Murder one time, we painted the whole set purple, and then none of us talked to costumes, and they had Viola in this beautiful purple outfit. And so it was a fiasco because she shows up and she like blends in with the wall. So we absolutely have to pay attention to those things. But we do kind of hand it over to camera and lighting because they're on set. They're actually establishing with the director, how they want to light the show. So we talk to them all ahead of time about these are the colors that we have stuff. I know people talk a lot about like, oh, this looks dark or it's a lot of that is a choice made, not with us. Like we build in lights into the set and then it's artistic choice on how it looks. The Enterprise D, we painted everything exactly as it was, knowing that they were going to shoot it 4K. They were going to shoot it with certain cameras that weren't the cameras that they shot in the 80s. I mean, we weren't recreating it SD for SD. I mean, we knew it was going to be 4K. So we adjusted like the plexiglass. I treated differently for 4K. But like you can see the framing of it too. People are like, oh, did you make the bridge bigger because the cameras are different? No, it looks bigger because it's a wider lens.
It's a wider lens. Yeah.
Yeah, like that's the reason. But for me to change the colors on that, I mean, they look different. I think people actually told us like, oh, you guys didn't get that right. I actually matched it off of an old set piece that somebody had like bought off eBay. So I know that color was right. So for me, it was more important to get it historically accurate and then let the guys shoot it beautifully, which is what I think they did. But the lighting too, we build in LEDs now, and so those guys have a full like RGB control. So all of that will be done in the lighting process. And all I do is if it's like a research thing, like the red alert and all of that, is I pull videos and I show clips. Okay, here's how red alert works. Here's what, like red alert, the first time they did it, they turned everything red and it was like a Vegas showroom. We were like, oh no, only these things are red for red alert. These are white. So I had kind of a guide, and Glenn Levine was our gaffer. He was awesome in like checking in. Hey, do I have this right? How does this look? And then they would light the actors how they do. But I'm just like, if it's in the set, if it's built into the set, I'll like be annoying. But other than that, like that's not my department. It's to those guys. So.
Go ahead.
No, I was just saying it's so much easier now just for the gaffers just to, I don't know what they do on your set, but like to walk around with an iPad and DMX and just change lighting and do all that stuff versus what they had to go through 20 years ago or something and just play and experiment. It's
still complicated, but yeah, it's like a different kind of complicated because now they have so much control.
Yeah, everything's they have to program every little thing, and
Yeah. So, and we switched that out. So I know they lit most of this Enterprise D with neons, and we didn't use any neon. Everything we did was LED. And to answer your question about colors, Mike Ikuda had to change every single one of his graphics. He had to color tone by eye to match what was seen on the show because he had colored gels, and he sent me pictures of the gels, and they're purple and orange.
Yeah, this is exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, these are the colors that I intended, but the neon, the blue of the neon mixed with it and then made it green. Yeah. And so actually one of my first conversations with Mike was, if I print what he designs, so if he shows me what he originally designed and it's purple and orange, when I print it now, where everything we print on Plexi is going to look exactly as it looks on your computer screen. And so I said, it's going to look significantly different. It's going to look like as you intended. Do we want to do as you intended, or do we want to do it what the audience remembers? And that was like my first phone conversation with him. I'm like, oh, I'm talking to Mike Ikuda. But he agreed with me. He was like, we should do what the audience remembered. And so he redid everything to match. It's more blue, green, kind of yellow, off-whitey, a little bit of purple, but not, the neon screwed it all up. And for him, it was a fiasco. Like on the first day of shooting, on the pilot, Mike was like, oh, this isn't what I wanted at all. This wasn't my design, but he just lived with it.
Right.
Have you ever, so like on one of the very first, when I was younger, first films I ever did, the art team spent a ton of time setting something up, and we were inexperienced, and like we ended up like not showing that side at all. They probably spent like 7 hours doing something like 5 a.m. or something on an indie. And I'm just curious, like, did you work on something that you put your your heart and soul into, and then for whatever reason it didn't make it?
Oh, all the time. Yeah. I mean, we do stuff, and it's hard now too. So I think the older generation of directors will tell you what their shot is, and maybe it's even like a proscenium. Like, I'm only looking this direction. I only need 2 walls. I don't need a ceiling. They know all of that ahead of time because they know what their shots are going to be. A lot of the newer directors shoot. They all need 4 walls. And it also depends on if you're doing an action sequence or like if the camera's going to be all over. Like I've shot stuff that's all handheld, and I won't just give them 2 walls if it's handheld because they'll see off the set. But like planning for that stuff, you just try to put you try to stay in touch with the director, and you try to stay in touch with these people, the camera guys. It's like, hey, what do you see? I think Crescenzo, our DP on Picard, can tell us what the pizza slice was. Here's my pizza slice. And he'll show you kind of what he's seeing, but sometimes he'll tell me the pizza slice. And then
something.
Yeah. And so, because, none of this stuff will be seen, but that happens, all day, every day. So we just try to dress 360 just so they have stuff. But, so if it's in the opposite of what they end up shooting, it doesn't make it. Like, our spaceship stuff is fuzzy, like everything yellowed up the field. And I'm like, it's like $5 million set.
And it's a blur of color. Yeah.
Yeah.
Before we get to Promising Young Women, Trevor, which I promised Trevor all your time, favorite director on Picard?
I think on Picard, for sure, Jonathan Frakes. He's the favorite. Everybody likes likes Jonathan Frakes. He's just like, he makes it fun. He's very experienced. He knows what he's shooting. There's no like doing the opposite of what he tells everybody. He's, and he's very no nonsense. He's kind of like the set dad. So I think for sure Frakes.
Was his knowledge or anyone's really, like Metalis or Dave or anyone, was it ever like, wow, they're really dialed into it where it became like a problem, not a problem, but just like a little bit more work, or was that a benefit?
No, they make it fun because he knows, I mean, he's so many episodes in now, that he'll cite something like, oh, on Ryza, this, and it's like, oh, we're such nerds. So that happens a lot, like at work, but it doesn't get in the way at all. And actually, a lot of times they'll call the art department down to the set to explain something we put in there. Like in Seven's room, they wanted, everything that we had put, all of her figurines and all of that stuff. They know most of it, but they just want to make sure that art is in sync with, what they're, or we did it in Beverly's ship, the Ilios. There was a bookshelf full of stuff. And some of it's sci-fi filler and some of it's super important to Beverly, cited from Next Generation. And so they called us down to explain to the guys pointing the camera what to focus on and what not to focus on, just to make sure we're not like focusing on a red herring or something, Sure. So it's there's just so much. There's so much history. There's like books and books and books of technical manuals and mid-century modern furniture, and we've got to track the chairs that are being used in Discovery, which is in the year 3000, and then stuff that was used in the 2250s, and now we're in the 2400s. So we've got to like kind of track all of that, So but I think their knowledge can only help us and make it more fun.
Do you prefer the 1800s now? Is that
are
you done with the future?
I want to go back to space. I had a good 9 months on a Western. So now I've realized that was enough.
How has volume LED technology affected your job?
Oh, so I'm in school right now for Unreal Engine.
Oh,
Unreal 5. That thing's a beast.
Yeah. So I'm in a 10-week Unreal connectors course. So I'll be certified. Like by October, I'll have it. And so after the first week, it's like we've learned so much already. It's like 4 days a week. So I'm just
come to the East Coast and teach my folks, because we're trying to get everyone on board. Yeah.
No, it's the future. And people were mad about cars when cars were invented. They're like, I'm going to stick to my horse. But like eventually it took over, and that was the preferred method of travel. And they're using it like Strange New Worlds. Star Trek Strange New Worlds is using the volume. I watched this show on Netflix.
No way, because I was convinced it wasn't. Really? They're using it?
Yeah. For the planets, yeah. Right.
They're the recent season for sure. I've seen a lot of behind the scenes, and they've got a couple, like, I don't know how, it's not like Star Wars where they had, multiple volume stages. But yeah, they're leaning on that. Now once you see it, you can't unsee it.
You can't unsee it. I mean, I feel like I see it more in Discovery or like the Star Wars properties that they do. I think Strange New Worlds does a really good job of.
But there's a show I just watched on Netflix called 1899. Mm-hmm. Have you heard of it?
Is that the boat one? Is that the boat one?
The boat one, yeah.
Yeah.
Got the whole thing on the volume because it was a COVID shoot. Mm-hmm. And it was an international cast, and there was all of this stuff. They had to be everywhere. They built the whole boat on the volume. They had actually one of the most special effects heavy rigs on stage. So it's volume, and it's got the water rigs and the boat on a gimbal. All of that stuff was done on volume stage. Whenever you see and they did like a 45-minute behind the scenes on it. Wow. Everything. And they're in, people are in there in mines, and they're like, it's very kind of high concept, but it's all volume. They had like maybe 2 locations, which actually I thought were their best locations, that they went out, and they're in a mental asylum and they're somewhere else. And those were actual locations, but everything else was volume. And it's, it was new technology, Mando just started using it.
Right. It sounds like for that, I was going to say, it just sounds like for them, they put all the other effort and resources into everything in front of the volume, around it, all the rigs and all that stuff, where I think we're seeing some shows or some productions, whatever they are, they just rely on the volume and a little bit of foreground, whatever. And they just like, I was saying this earlier, like sometimes I'll watch a show shot on volume and you see the person walking towards you, like they're going to cut right there. They had nowhere else to go. They're out of space, whatever. And just, it becomes you just can't unsee it. And it just,
I think it's got to be smart. And like the Art Directors Guild did a class, and they actually showed us, like, depending on what your shot is, you can plan, like they showed us a Western bar, and they were like, are we going to build the bar? If we're not going to build the bar, you'll actually see them push the bar into the volume so that it'll, all you have to build are a couple of tables. Yeah. Depending on what your shot is, it's fine. It's just, when you want to start doing like a lot of stuff, and like you said, they're running out of